I'm really, really well. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Now, I've been lucky enough to actually be able to see June again, and I've got to say congratulations on such a fantastic film.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Now, this is a film that's going to mean a lot to a lot of people. I know for myself personally, I lost my grandmother to dementia, so I was wondering where the idea for the film first came about for you.
Well, interesting. I mean, a lot of people ask me if I have some personal connection with dementia, and there's actually no one in my family who has been through that. It's more of I guess, a fascination that I've always had with memory and how much of us is tied up with memory, how much our memories define us, and just thinking about how lost we would be if those memories were taken away, and that kind of led to this idea.
So tell us a little bit about what happens with the character in this film, because I'd never heard about people having that temporary lapse where they start to remember things again. Tell us a little bit about that condition and also how you went about researching it.
Well, so, I've always kind of known anecdotally that dementia can be something that can kind of come and go a little bit. There's what's often called lucid spells, and even in the legal side of things, there is kind of papers about what happens when you've given power of attorney away from someone who has dementia, and then they suddenly have a return of lucidity, and then what happens to their rights if suddenly they are suddenly more cogent and aware. And so when I had this idea, I thought, well, how far can we take this? And so I arranged, I have a couple of contacts who are doctors, and I met with them, and I just ran the idea by them, and I said, look, this is the idea I've had. Is this medically feasible? Would this work? And their kind of response was interesting. It was that, yes, this does happen. I mean, the extent to which I wanted to take it was perhaps a stretch. There was a bit of license involved. But it's certainly something that can happen. And then, interestingly, in the process of making the film, I did meet some people, one woman in particular whose father came back completely for a couple of days. And she said, no, he was his old self for a couple of days. And it was amazing. And then 2 days later, he slipped back into his dementia and he was lost to them again. So, and that's one of the things that I always think is that we know so little about the brain, and we're constantly, there's so many interesting stories that happen to people because the brain is such a crazy and interesting part of us that all sorts of things are feasible.
Yeah. You mentioned where the idea originally came about. How was your writing process? How long did that writing process start? And how long did it take to get from getting those first ideas down to the first day of shooting?
Well, I was working on an idea, a completely different script. It was a science fiction idea before I started writing June again, and it was taking me months, it took years, and I was just struggling, and it was really hard work, and I just was floundering. And then eventually, with the help of my kind of reps, we decided that wasn't maybe I should put it on hold. So when I put that on hold, I had this idea quite quickly, and when it came to writing it, I wrote it. It was so much easier to write. It just kind of fell into play. It just fell onto the page, which I took at the time as a positive sign, because I was suddenly writing about something the characters I knew. I was drawing upon a lot of personal aspects of the story. There's a lot in June Again that's drawn from my own experience, from people I know, and from things that have happened to me. And it was just so much easier to write than the thing I'd been trying to write before. And so I wrote it relatively quickly, over probably about 6 weeks. And then once the C Pictures, the production company, got involved, we went through a few rounds of notes and rewrites and things over a period of about 6 months. So probably, I would say, about 8 or 9 months in total from the idea to the finished script.
Wow. And Noni Hazelhurst is so perfect as June. Did you write the role with her in mind, or did she end up in the role because of casting?
Well, you might think I'd written the role for her, but I didn't. The script was finished before Noni became involved. But I honestly can't think of a better person to play that role. One of the things I was very focused on finding, and whoever took that role was, the character of June she's a real busybody. She meddles in in people's lives, in her kids' lives, and she kind of she pushes things a long way, and it was very important that you still understood why she was doing that, and that you kind of you forgave her for her kind of busyness. And with someone like Noni, you do, because she's got this warmth and this you love her. She's just so lovable, and she gets away with it because she is who she is, and that was very important. And so once we found Noni and she agreed to come on board, it was such a relief, because I knew that she could pull that off.
Yeah, and how did Claudia and Stephen get involved? Because they're also amazing in this film, and I love Stephen playing these more serious roles. We saw him in Hounds of Love as well, and he was brilliant in that. How did Claudia and Stephen get involved?
Well, Claudia was the very first person to get involved. She got involved very early because she was friends with our casting director, Kirsty McGregor. So she came to an early table read, and she really liked the role, and so she said, "Look, if you're looking for someone, and we'd love to have you on board." So we signed her up very quickly, and I'm sure that having her involved helped us to get the others. And then Stephen was such a great result, because he was without even knowing exactly that it was him I was looking for. I knew that I wanted someone who could handle the comedy, but also had the depth to go to the emotional places that his characters go to. I mean, his character is kind of holding a lot of pain. It's like holding a big weight. And so, while a lot of comedic actors can handle the comedic side of things, I needed someone who you could just sense had something else going on that was a big part of their lives. And when I saw Hounds of Love that you just mentioned, I saw Stephen in that, which is a completely, I can't think of a more opposite role of comedic. I mean, it's just horrific, the character that he plays. And I just realized how much depth and breadth that he has. And so, once I saw that, I just knew that he would be able to take this role and take it to where it needed to go. And he did.
Yeah, as a director, you almost had like a dream team cast. What was that like, turning up on set and getting to work with these three people every day?
It was amazing. I mean, I must admit, it was a little bit intimidating at first, because I was blessed with this great cast, but I was also kind of, oh my God, now I've got to step up and I've got to, this is my first feature film. These guys between them have made, I don't know how many different productions. So one of the things that we did, which helped me, and I think it helped all of us actually, was that we had a couple of days together before we started shooting, where the four of us got together in a room. We sat around a table with the script in front of us, and we just, those three had never actually worked together, believe it or not. So they all, were kind of, there's a bit of anticipation from all of them about meeting each other. And so we got all that out of the way, and we spent a couple of days just going through the script, going through all the dialogue, talking about the characters, talking about, all those kind of background things that actors need to understand, the motivations and the, why does she do this? Why does she say that there? And we got all that out, and we had moments where we had different ideas, and we talked them through until we found common ground. And so by the end of those 2 days, we built a really great rapport together, and we also had kind of mapped out exactly what we were trying to do. So by the time we were on set, and it's a low budget film, so we didn't have the luxury of time. We had 20 days to shoot the film, so we couldn't afford to kind of spend 20 minutes discussing each scene. So that was a hugely beneficial thing to do. We just hit the ground running, and we all just got stuck in, and it was a great process.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of young filmmakers out there wondering, what was the biggest challenge for you taking that step from short filmmaking to doing your first feature?
Well, I think, each stage of the process was tricky. Probably the hardest thing, I think, for me was the writing process, because, I've written a lot of short films, and they're typically, like 5 pages or 10 pages. And so it's easy to think of the whole film in one kind of moment, and to picture the whole film in your head and run it through in your mind, and then you can rewrite it in an afternoon from scratch, because it's only a few pages. But when you come to a 100-page script, to map all that out, and then to kind of start to work on one section of it without messing up another section of it, to kind of map the whole emotional journey that each of those characters go through, and to make sure it never kind of lags in terms of the pacing and the flow. That was such a huge learning curve, and it really, I didn't anticipate how tricky that would be, and it was really interesting in the editing process, because that's kind of almost the mirror image of that, where you've shot everything, but then you've got to take all that footage and map that story out across 100 minutes. And that's when you realize that the scene that you thought was so important and had to have all that time and all those moments in it, you realize that actually that could be cut into a tenth of that length, and it's just one shot of Noni just saying one line that could capture everything that you spent hours writing and on your own. And so the editing process was a really interesting phase, where that's where you see the bits of the film that where the audience starts to yawn, or they start to kind of lose interest, and the other bits where you realize there's not the clarity, where you need to really make sure that people understand those moments.
Yeah.
So the editing was a really interesting phase.
Yeah. And one of the things that really made me love this film was the mixture of comedy and drama. Little things like the security guard giving June the key pass details because he knows she's going to forget it. How difficult was that for you to juggle that comedy and drama in a film that has such a serious background to it?
Well, it was difficult, but it was also the thing that most excited me about the idea. I mean, I've always loved the mixture of comedy and drama, and I think comedy I think is a really interesting tool, because when you have a comedy, people are much more receptive to ideas, and people kind of let their guard down. They're not as cynical. And so when you have a comedy, you can suddenly insert something really powerful in there, and people aren't ready for it, and you can actually evoke a lot of emotion. You get a lot of reaction from people because they're kind of laughing along, and then suddenly you have a kind of gut punch. And I think I've heard Noni talk about this as well, that life is never just funny. Even in comedy there is drama. And even in our lives, even in the most serious moments, then funny things can happen. I mean, even with dementia, you talk to anyone who has someone in their life with dementia, there are moments that are hilarious.
Yep.
Of the crazy circumstances and the things that happen. And I think you can't just have one without the other. I think knitting those two together is that's our daily lives. You go from laughter to tears, very easily and very quickly.
Definitely. I can definitely remember one Christmas where my grandmother decided that some grandkids were going to get 2-minute noodles for Christmas presents, and one lucky cousin got $500. So yeah, we definitely do have those moments. But JJ, I know we are right out of time, but I'd love to wrap up by just asking, is there anything you would like to say to our listeners before they head along and see June again?
Well, I would love you to see the film. I think if you've got a family, then you will relate to this film, because it's very much about family. It's about redemption. And anyone who's had a falling out with someone in their family, not just people with who've lived with people in their family with dementia. I think that's another whole layer that I think will be rewarding. But I think for me, it's about reconnecting, and especially after we've all gone through the lockdown and COVID. I think a lot of us have been separated from family, and this story is all about reconnection. And I'm hoping that people really relate to that.
It definitely does. Well, JJ, thank you so much for chatting to us today, and thank you so much for giving us such a special film as well.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's very kind.
No problem. I'll let you go. Have a great night, and I can't wait to see what film you work on next.
Oh, cheers.
Awesome.
Great to talk to you.
Thanks, mate. Okay. Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks so much. I enjoyed that one.
Thank you, Chris.